Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be with you. I need to ask your indulgence today. I am recovering, I think, from bronchitis. So my voice is a little raspy. I may need to stop and get a drink of water, which I've got right here by my side. And I hope that this will not be a problem for you. As Zach said, I am interested in your questions. I have several things I want to get through today, but I'd like you to ask your questions as you think of them through the chat, and then we'll pause from time to time during the presentation and catch up to see if there are any questions in the chat that we should deal with. And then, as he mentioned, at the end, if we have time, we'll be happy to take any questions that you have. And I reserve the right to say, I don't know right now, but I'll look it up. Okay. Before I start my PowerPoint, I wanted to show you the books. Being librarians, I knew you'd like some books. So first of all, this is the paperback copy of the most recent Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, and it's the 12th edition. And you will notice it's pretty thick, 700 and some pages. This is a reference book, very important to those of us who are in parliamentary procedure, and to those of you who want to know the answer to some thorny questions. Here's where you go. Now, the one I'm going to concentrate more on today is this one, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, in brief. This was written by the same authors, so it's 100% legitimate, but it contains really only about 20% of the material that's in the other book. The authors and other practitioners have noticed that only about 20% of what's in the big book is used most of the time. So they took the material that is the most frequently used and needed, thank you, there we go, to put into this nice little book, which is about 200 pages, including the index and everything. And it's very readable. It is the kind of book you could actually sit down in an evening with a cup of coffee or hot chocolate and read. And so I encourage you to do that. I don't know if your libraries carry this particular version or not. I imagine you have the hardcover copy of the full-size Roberts. But if you can get your hand on in brief, I think you will enjoy that, and have a copy for yourself if you can. So that's a word from my spouse. All right, now we are going to turn on the recording. I'm not the recording, I'm sorry. I meant my PowerPoint. Let's see if we can get it going. And then I'm going to... There we go. Can everyone see that? What happens at a meeting is the topic for today. And this is more or less chapter 2 and a little bit of other stuff from Roberts in brief. And I hope you're enjoying the screen. This is the only page I think that's going to do this changing of colors for you. But I just think it's so pretty. It's a nice way to start the morning. So we'll be talking about what happens at a meeting, in particular, the roles of president and secretary, what a quorum is, what do we mean by the order of business, and what's an agenda. Okay, first of all, I showed you the book, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, is the full title. And it was first published in 1876. And I understand there are some first edition copies around the country someplace, and I think they're quite valuable. The author was Major at that time, Henry M. Robert, who was a civil engineer in the Army Corps of Engineers. In addition to being famous for this Robert's Rules of Order book that he wrote, he was also famous for being on the team, probably leading the team of engineers that built the seawall in Galveston, Texas. I don't know if anybody has been down there to notice it. There's even a plaque with his name on it down there. And it's been quite the thing to help people in Galveston avoid a lot of the damage from the various hurricanes and storms that they get. Now, as I mentioned, we are in the 12th edition. The original book, I think, was about 100 pages, but the new one now is 714. That includes a lot of things, like I said, charts and indexes or indices and so forth. It has grown over the years because it became very popular in 1876 when it came out, and a lot of people wrote to Major then Henry Robert and asked questions, made suggestions, and so forth. So over the years, the book has grown to include some of those situations that people had asked him about. So it's got an interesting history itself. All right, there we go. It's really considered a reference book. It's not necessarily the kind of book you'd sit down on an evening like you would with the in brief, although I know people who do it, not me. We call it RONR for short. And it is adopted as parliamentary authority in many organizations' bylaws. This is probably the most well, it is the most popular, most well-used, well-known parliamentary authority in the country. There are many others, but this is number one. And it's a default for the organizations. If you have an organization, you probably have rules and bylaws and all that. And those are the items that govern your organization. But if you have a situation that your bylaws, for instance, do not cover, then your default is Roberts. If you've adopted Roberts as your parliamentary authority, you look up in Roberts to see what you should do. But if Roberts says one thing and your bylaws say something else on the same topic, you go with your bylaws. Now, Roberts in Brief is what I was suggesting. RIB is what we call it. The third edition. So this is only a fairly new idea to come out with this in brief. And that's 214 pages. But that's the one I encourage you to get for yourself. All right. Now, when you're approaching a meeting, you want to make sure that you have a plan so that you can succeed. You want to get organized. First, you need to have a president or chairman. You may call the person whatever you'd like, but you do need someone who will preside or chair the meetings. The other jobs of the president would be to enforce the rules and to designate speakers. Sometimes people forget about this very important role of the president. If you wish to speak either in debate or to make a motion or to ask a question or for any reason, you need to get permission or recognition from the president, from the chair. And there are many ways to do that. You just go with whatever is appropriate for your situation. Raise your hand, stand up, go to the microphone, whatever is appropriate. But it is very important that the president be the one that designates speakers. You don't just start talking. Otherwise, you get chaotic. The president, excuse me, water time. Thank you. The president doesn't control the outcome. That is, the president doesn't say, okay, people, listen up. This is what we're going to do. The president says, would you like to do such and such? Or waits for a motion, so a suggestion from somebody in the group, and then facilitates the process. So the president doesn't determine what the final result is going to be, but the president does make it easy for people in the group, members of the group, to go through the process and come up with the answer to whatever question is you're dealing with. Okay, next you need to have a secretary. This is a person who's elected. This is an officer. The main job of the secretary is to keep the minutes of each meeting. And how long should a person keep them, or an organization keep their minutes, you might ask? Forever. The minutes are the official record of what was done at your meeting, and they are to be kept forever. I know that can be a bit of a chore. There are organizations and ways out there to archive your information and so forth. it gets pretty hard after your organization's been in existence for a while for a poor secretary to be hauling around a box of written out minutes. And I know a lot of things are digital these days, but you have to be sure that whatever format was used 20 years ago can still be read today. And that's a problem I have with my Christmas letters from way back when. So anyhow, keep the minutes of each meeting forever. And it's a written record of what was done, not what was said. The minutes should be short and sweet without personal comments. And by that, I mean, if there is a debate on something, the secretary should not put in the minutes the various points of the debate. You need to put in the motion that was made and who made it, and then the result, the outcome of the vote on that motion. And we should not say in the minutes, so-and-so gave an inspiring talk. That would be a personal remark, a personal comment, or we had a recess and had delicious cake. We don't need that kind of thing. So a written record of what was done, not everything that was said. Respectfully submitted is sometimes, or has been used over the years. It's not used so much now. It's not wrong, but it's kind of old-fashioned. So the secretary just signs his or her name to the minutes, and that's all you have to put there. Now, if the secretary who has been elected is not present for that particular meeting, you do need to elect a secretary pro tem, that is a temporary secretary for that day. Now, I know in the real world, somebody just volunteers and you go with that person. You're very grateful that they have said they would do it. But you do need to at least have some sort of process where the group has an opportunity to say yay or no, yes or no, to a particular person acting as secretary for the day, because that is an officer. That's an important office. So it has to be sort of elected. And that could be, the chair might say, Mary Smith has volunteered to be secretary pro tem. Are there any other nominations or volunteers for secretary pro tem? And of course there won't be. And then you just say, well, then without objection, Mary Smith is elected secretary pro tem today. So you can do kind of a unanimous consent sort of deal. But this is important. It's not just somebody saying they'll do it, because they've got to be very good at writing in order to be secretary. Okay. Well, let's go back. Are there any questions that have come in, Zach, yet about those two issues?
Yes, we did receive one question. Rebecca Hudson asks, if someone else takes the minutes, a staff member, at the meeting, should the board secretary sign them?
Well, the person who writes the minutes really should have their signature on it, because they are, in a sense, certifying that this is indeed their work and that they have, this is what they think is their version of the minutes. It wouldn't hurt to have the secretary sign them, but, the first time they are sent out, they are just considered a draft. They will need to be approved, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The minutes need to be approved, and then at that point, maybe the board secretary could sign them after they have been approved. It kind of depends on the custom. I don't think that particular question is answered in Roberts that I'm aware of, but it's a good one. It's a good one, and that might be something to put in your own rules about that, how you'd like that to happen, because that is specific to your organization. Good.
There is another question
Okay.
that has just been submitted. If someone else takes the minutes, a staff member, is a secretary pro tem needed?
Well, as long as the minutes are covered, probably not. Apparently, the role of the secretary in this organization is not to take the minutes. It's the role of a staff member, and that's perfectly fine. So If the minutes are covered, then you don't need a secretary pro tem. The other job that the secretary might have would be to take the role. And if somebody else would take the role, or probably the staff member takes the role, correct? If the staff member that's doing the minutes would probably take the role. Okay, so, all right, so no, just disregard everything I just said. No, no, every organization is different, and that's good that you ask these questions and look at them from different points of view. But what I'm giving you is kind of what's basic, but you've got a different twist on it, and that's good. Let's talk about those things.
Okay, thank you. That's
Okay.
all the questions for now.
All righty, thank you. Good, I appreciate the questions. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is quorum. I hope that's a word you're familiar with, and it is the minimum number of members needed at a meeting to validly conduct business. Again, a mouthful. It's the minimum number of members that need to be present so that you can get business done at a meeting. If you have bad weather or something and you only have 3 people that show up for, now this is an in-person meeting, obviously, if it's weather related, then would you want those people to have the authority to make decisions for the whole group, since there are so few? So you want to determine what is the smallest number of people that you think is reasonable to make decisions for the organization at any particular time. And this, you need a quorum as well for an online meeting as well as an in-person meeting. The number, that's the quorum, should be stated in your bylaws. Excuse me. Sorry. If it's not stated in your bylaws, the default is a majority of the membership. That is generally, or that is frequently what people do. That is not the best thing. But if you just happen to miss that point when you were putting together your bylaws about what your quorum should be, then that's what your default would be, a majority. And sometimes that works pretty well, but other times that's an unreasonable expectation. So that's why you want to make sure you've got it in there. I think of Minnesota, of course, and it's if you had an in-person meeting, it's the number who would show up the day after a snowstorm. Now, not during a snowstorm, because we cancel meetings when we have snowstorms. Sorry. Okay. The best thing to do is to have a specific number. I put down 15 here, but it depends on definitely on the size of your group. If you have 1,000 people in your membership, 15 would not be a reasonable number to have as the quorum. That's too small to make a decision for a group of 1,000. Maybe 100, maybe 75, maybe 50, whatever you think would be a reasonable number. But a specific number, whatever you decide that is usually the best idea for a quorum. As I said, that you could use a majority of the membership. Now notice the definition, please, of majority. It is more than half, not one more than half, not 50% plus one, not anything else that you have heard. It is more than half, because sometimes it's just half more than half. If you're a board or a committee of, say, 9, half of that's 4.5, so 5 would be your majority, and that's half more than half. So more than half is the correct definition of majority. You might put in the bylaws, it's a particular percentage of the membership, like 25% or something, but that can be difficult to figure out, not mathematically, but you don't always know exactly how many members you have at any given time because of the way the dues come in or don't come in or whatever. So a specific number is still the best idea for determining the quorum. I looked up for fun what the Minnesota State statute for nonprofits says about a quorum, and they do weigh in on that. If the bylaws specify something, then that's what it is. But if the bylaws don't specify, then it is a majority. But if you're talking about a board, it has to be at least 1/3 of the directors. So you cannot drop below the threshold of 1/3 of your directors if you are a board. And they also state in there that the quorum remains even if members leave during a meeting. Roberts doesn't like that. But that's what Minnesota statute says, at least that little paragraph that came up when I Googled it. I am not an attorney. So I just looked up to see what it is, because I've had some questions from organizations that I deal with. They have some strange ways of writing their quorum, and they wanted to know if it was all right. And I said, in those cases, no, because they were sometimes going to come to be less than the 1/3. So anyhow, that was just kind of thrown in there, but you do need to know what your quorum is. Now, if you have a meeting and you're all set to do a great big piece of business, and people want to do it anyway, even though you don't have a quorum, you can, but you do run a risk. You run a risk that it won't be ratified. So if action taken without a quorum needs to be ratified at the next meeting, and if people that come to that meeting say, sure, glad you did that, yeah, we vote in favor of ratification, you're okay. But if somebody says, you wanted to, you voted to do what? And they did not approve of that action, then the people who are at that meeting, at which there was not a quorum, are responsible for the ramifications of that decision. And if that means pulling out their wallets and paying whatever that fee was, that's what they need to do. So there is some risk. But on the other hand, there are some situations where you have to pay a bill or you have to make a decision right now. And if you go ahead and do it without a quorum, you need to get it ratified and hope and pray that it goes through. So, but without a quorum, you can take a recess, you can certainly adjourn, you can set another meeting to finish up your business if you want. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about is simplified standard order of business. We're going to call, are there questions?
There are just a couple questions about.
Okay, good. That's a good play. Good break.
Actually, the first one is not directly about quorum, but relates to the previous slide. If a secretary pro tem is necessary when the secretary is absent, is a president pro tem also needed when the president is absent?
Yes, but that's why you have a vice president. That's why you have a vice president, usually. Now, if you don't, if you just have the president and secretary, which we sort of the basic ones, then yes, you would elect somebody who would be president pro tem for that meeting. Yes, good point.
Okay, thank you. And then a question from me. Should non-voting members be considered in quorum determinations?
Okay, non-voting members. Okay, now that sounds like a little bit like an oxymoron to me. You're either a member or you're not. And if you're a member, then you have voting rights. I frankly have not looked at your bylaws, and I neglected to ask you, Zach, to send them, but I'll ask you now because I'm really going to need them for next meeting. Okay. It depends what it says in your bylaws. I'm assuming, okay, are they truly members?
We have people on our policy advisory council who are representatives of specific constituencies in the library community.
Okay.
And those people are appointed or elected either by the state or by their constituencies. And then we have other members who are referred to as staff, such as the Minitex director. And some people are listed as ex officio. And we don't consider them in the same way. I'm not reading the bylaws at this moment either, but recollection is that we have members that are non-voting.
Okay, well, I would have to look at the bylaws to figure out the best answer for that question. And that's a very good question. And that's why you want to make sure your bylaws do address it. who, when they show up to a meeting, who does get to vote. That's really important, particularly when you've got something that's controversial. The term ex officio usually means by virtue of their office that they attend a meeting. In some organizations, they do get to vote, and in others, they do not. But you asked if they're counted in the quorum, and the answer to that one is usually not. But I'll need to look that one up. So would you send me your bylaws one of these days? I mean, not now.
Yeah.
One of
Yeah,
these days.
okay, thank you. More on that later then.
Yeah, more on that later, but let me write
Okay.
it up.
Thank you, Pat.
Mhm.
That's all the questions.
Okay, thank you. But these are good, and this is why bylaws and rules and all these things are very important, because when you get down to the nitty-gritty, you want to make sure that the people who have certain rights have those rights recognized, and that the people who do not have the rights do not try to take over that right. So, we wanted to get that correct. So good. Okay, thank you. Now, simplified standard order of business. This is MRUN is what we call it. At least that's what I call it. And that's what's in the Robertson brief. There is a different acronym in the big book, but then that gets into some other questions. So we're just going to go with what we call the simplified standard order of business. And this is just sort of the overarching way that agendas are set up and how meetings operate. Now, you can do it differently, but this is the standard. Okay. M stands for reading and approval of minutes. Believe it or not, this is actually your first item of real business in a meeting. It should be the reading and approval of minutes. And we'll talk about the reading in a little bit. R stands for reports. And you do reports in this order if the people have reports. You don't have to call on somebody if you know they don't have one. But you do officers first, going with the president first, because the president is probably the first one named in your bylaws. And then if you happen to have a board that's connected somehow to your group, then the board might have a report. And then various committees, starting with standing committees, the ones that are in your bylaws, and then other ad hoc or special committees that are there to do a particular task. Then the next thing you'd have is unfinished business. Notice it is not called old business. I know you have new business, so it sounds like you should have old business, but you don't. It's not old business. It's not because it's way back. Old business means stuff that we did a couple of years ago, but this is stuff that we did not finish at the last meeting. And so it's unfinished business. And because it was on last month's agenda or in consideration last time, it has his priority over new business, which is what the N is. So the unfinished business comes first, and then, so you catch up, and then you get the new business. And you'll notice the flow in an agenda is past, present to future. The past represents, or the minutes represent the past. In between the last minute or the last meeting and this meeting, you talk about that, you get the reports of what officers, boards, and committees have done. And then you catch up with any unfinished business you didn't get done last time. And then you look ahead and talk about new business. So it's a logical sequence, I think, past to present to future. Now, from that idea of the order of business, you make up an agenda. Now, it's the job of the president, sometimes with the help of the secretary, to put together a specific plan for each meeting. So even though the standard order of business doesn't change itself, the agenda would change a little bit anyway for every meeting. So let's look at a specific plan. You would always have a call to order, even if it's the president just saying the meeting will come to order. That is the first thing you start with. If you happen to have an invocation, happen to have something that's patriotic, like an anthem or pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, you would do them in this order. Always do God before country, And then if you have an anthem and a pledge, the anthem goes first. Just so that you know. But whatever you have as your typical way to start a meeting would happen here. And then you look for the quorum. You can have a silent roll call or a verbal roll call by the secretary to determine if you have the correct number of voting members. Now, the president can just eyeball it, but if there's any doubt, the secretary can chime in. But it is the president who declares whether or not there is a quorum present. The secretary is helpful. Okay. All right, then I changed color font here. The minutes come up next. Reading and approval of the minutes is what is said. Now, if you have sent out the minutes ahead of time, which almost every organization does now by email, they call you, give a call to the meeting and they tell you what's going to happen. And then here's a draft, and these are a draft at this point. Here's a draft of the minutes of the last meeting. Then they do not necessarily have to be read, actually physically read out loud at the meeting when they're about to be approved. But if one person, even just one person says, "Oh, please read them," then they must be read. Okay, then you get into reports and officers, committee chairs, standing committees, and ad hoc, unfinished business, new business, announcements probably, and then adjournment. And if you have a program, if you have a guest speaker, that speaker can go anywhere that it's convenient. There's no particular place where a program has to go if you've got one. And you may have other items in here, but this is how the standard order of business kind of fits into the rest of the agenda. All right, now let's go back. Any questions on these items on the agenda?
We do have a couple of questions that have popped up. The first one asks, if we have alternate board members who are at the meeting, do they have a vote if the regular board member is also present?
Oh. Again, that will depend on your minutes, but probably not. If you have a specific number of board members, and I think that's usually what people have, and an alternate would be voting if that the original is not able to be there. But if the alternate is there just because the alternate would like to see what's going on, and that's a good idea for an alternate, they probably both don't have voting. Again, that would need to be, if you would want them to have voting rights, it would have to be listed in the bylaws. But if it's not listed, then I would think the answer would be no, they would not have a vote.
Okay. Does the person requesting the reading of the minutes need to be a voting member?
I would say yes. The person who would not be a voting member would be considered a guest. And it's true that person might not have received the mailing, might not have gotten the minutes, but they really don't have much standing. They can't really ask for things like that. Now, if they want to humbly beg, and the chair allows it, well, that's okay too. Excuse me.
Okay.
The chair could allow it.
Okay, thank you. That's all of the new questions.
Oh, you guys ask such good questions. You really do. Thank you. Okay. Now, this is not in the book, but it's one of my favorite things. And in fact, it's one of the things I do the most. I do quite a few workshops, but I think writing scripts is what I do the most of for my clients. This is something that is helpful for the president, can also be helpful for the secretary to have it. And of course, if you have a parliamentarian, on your ranks, then that person would be the one to write it or to assist in writing it. But if you don't, whoops, All right, I hit that by mistake, but that can come up. It's still, if you are the president or the chair of something, go ahead and write one for yourself. It is something that's developed after the agenda is set. So agenda first, then script. And it contains every word that the chair plans to say during the meeting. And it's extremely freeing to know that you don't have to keep in your head everybody's name. You don't have to keep in your head how you approve minutes. You don't have to keep in your head how you deal with the treasurer's report if you have one. It's just, you'll sleep so much better the night before if you have a script written. It gives the correct text for each part of the agenda so that you get it correct. The chair comes out looking smooth and professional, and because everything's been thought out ahead of time, you know it's correct, and you'll gain a lot of confidence. I have noticed as a parliamentarian, even for national groups, that the presidents are nervous. And to get up in front of a group of 500, 600 people is nerve-wracking for almost everybody. And if they have a script, it just helps to calm you down. And so take advantage of that for yourself too. So, excuse me, it's prepared by the chairs themselves or a parliamentarian if they have one. You can give a copy ahead of time to the secretary, and that can help with the minutes. And of course, you can save it in your computer as a template for future meetings. So scripts are great, and I'm going to give you exactly what I mean in a second here. Here's a sample. This is the sort of thing I would write. The first item is on the agenda. That blue thing, the blue wording, call to order, is taken directly from the agenda. So I write that first and then kind of indent a little bit and then say exactly what words the chair will say. And the chair will say, the meeting will come to order. Welcome to the annual meeting of the Society to Save the Salamander. I am Pat Reymann, your chair. And then going into the opening ceremonies. Please stand if you are able for the national anthem, which will be led by my friend Ginny Altman, who is a real person and a beautiful singer and a parliamentarian. So that would be that. And then the next thing on the agenda would be to make sure you have a quorum. So would the secretary please call the roll? Or I might say, would the secretary please note the roll? And that would be a kind of a silent roll call. So if you have a small enough group, she can say, okay, it's this person, this person, this person are here. Maybe she'll have a checklist. And then you can agree that you have a quorum present. Okay, usually the next thing that happens is the approval of the agenda. Now that's a little bit controversial, but not really. For the most part, people like to approve the agenda. But if later on somebody wants to add something to the agenda, particularly under new business, that is allowed. It doesn't cut off other things that people want to bring up. Okay, so the agenda, the draft of the agenda has been sent out. Are there any changes to the agenda? The chair would say. And then the ... of course, are the pauses. Since there are none, the agenda is approved as printed. And so you'd go from there. Okay, then we get to the part with the minutes. Now the minutes have a special way that they need to be approved and they need to be done. And most people on their own don't do it quite right. So this is why it's really helpful for you to have a script. The chair would say, the next item of business is the approval of the minutes which were sent to you. So since they were sent, the chair is not going to say anything about reading them. Are there any corrections? Not, are there any additions, corrections, modifications, amendments? Nothing like that. Are there any corrections? That's the question. And then this is the time for people to say, well, yeah, on page 2, I think I said such and such instead. So please strike out that and insert something else. And then the chair can just say, okay, or can ask, is there any objection to making that correction? Because maybe the secretary and maybe the chair both heard it the way it was written originally, and they don't agree with the correction that somebody made. So if there's any controversy at all, this is the time when maybe a vote needs to be taken, or that, first of all, you can debate it. Is there any objection to making that correction? The chair would say, and someone else could say, I object. I heard it such and such, the first way, the original way. And then if you need to, you can take a vote on it. That does not happen very often, but it could. And minutes are extremely important, so you do want to get them correct. But generally, are there any corrections? And then, is there any objection to making that correction? There usually isn't. And then, since there's no objection, the correction is made. So it isn't just one person saying, correct the minutes to do this. If other people disagree, there is a chance for a little give and take on this. And then after that, are there further corrections? And since there are no further corrections, the minutes are approved. You can just say the minutes are approved, or you can say the minutes are approved as corrected, or if there were no corrections, the minutes are approved as printed, whatever you'd like. But the minutes are approved. Notice you do not vote to approve the minutes. You can vote on a correction if it's controversial, but you do not vote on the approval of the minutes. So the basic step here is, are there any corrections? Since there are none, the minutes are approved. And those are the two things you want to be sure to have in your script, but this will cover all contingencies right here, if you've got the opportunity for people to make corrections. So this might be a little different from what you were thinking, but this is correct. And if it's helpful to have it written out when you are the chair. Okay, I thought there might be a question on that. Okay, exactly.
Carol from Kichigami asks, we currently approve the minutes in the consent agenda. Do we need to separate this item?
I know what you mean by consent agenda. I don't work with many organizations that have used it. I think that's okay. You have, if anybody has an objection or a correction to the minutes, people have the opportunity to pull that out of the consent agenda, correct? Yeah. So no, I think that would be okay, but don't let a correction slide by. If the minutes have a mistake in them, they need to be corrected. And so putting them in the consent agenda, I would worry, would make people overlook them. So, but it's not wrong.
That's all of our questions.
Okay, here we go. Okay, that was minutes. Now we're reports. The next item of business is the hearing of reports. And then by this time you have on your agenda a list of all the committee chairs who have reports. You don't need to call on the people who don't have reports, like I said before. But if you have the committee and the name of the person on the agenda printed, they are alerted to the fact, if they weren't before, that they have a committee report to give. And then you'll have everything right in front of you, and you don't have to struggle to remember your best friend's name. Okay. So, and then remember we said officers go first and the president goes next, is the first officer. So the chair will offer a report at this time. Notice that the chair or the president is speaking in the third person. It's not, I will offer a report at this time, but the chair will offer a report at this time. That is not easy for people. It is the preferred way to do it, but it is not the end of the world if you don't do it. But it does sound so formal and so cool when you do. And if you have everything written down in your script, then it'll be easier for you to remember. So the chair gives the report. And then if you have a treasurer that gives a report, that would be probably next. Your vice president might have a report or not, but then you skip to your treasurer. To give the financial report, the chair recognizes the treasurer, whatever the name is, ... So the treasurer reports, and then you ask, are there any questions about the report? And then something like, the report will be filed for audit. Please notice the capital letters here. Do not adopt the treasurer's report. And the reason for that is nobody in the room has enough information to know if the treasurer's report is correct or not. The treasurer is a good person, but treasurers can make mistakes. And sometimes treasurers are not good people and they can steal from you. And I know some examples, not in your organization, but in some that I belong to. Excuse me. And if you as an organization have adopted a fraudulent treasurer's report, it can get you into legal hot water. I don't know the ramifications exactly, but it can be a mess. So what you do is you just, you don't accept the report. You don't do anything but thank them. Sorry. What you will do probably annually is adopt an audit report. You probably have an audit committee, and if you don't, I recommend it. Members or non-members. Excuse me, this is going to take a cough drop.
I just wanted, while Pat is having that cough drop, I just want to thank you, Pat, for soldering on despite your throat discomfort. I know I'm not the only one that's very grateful.
Oh, thank you. Oh. Okay, I think we got it now. Okay. Once a year or so, certainly anytime you change treasurers, you should have a committee, at least a committee of just lay people, members of your organization if you want, to go through and compare the bank statements, vouchers, checkbook, and all that sort of thing. They would make a report to the organization if you have an annual meeting or whenever time you designate. And they should say what they have done and that they find that the books are in order. And then that would be something that the group would adopt. That would be the report of the audit committee. So I know there are companies that have big, deep audits every now and then, and they cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And it's necessary for the General Millses of the world, but it probably is not necessary for the librarians. But I'm sorry, I thought I had this. I gave a talk on Saturday and I did pretty well without coughing. Okay, so don't adopt the treasurer's report. Thank the treasurer for the work. Adopt the auditor's report when that happens. If the committees make reports and they have recommendations on things they would like you to do, the group to do, they make motions at the end of their reports, and that's when you consider them. You don't have to wait till new business. You do them during the report time. That's when you can work on the motions that come forward from the committees. And we'll be talking about motions in detail next week or in 2 weeks. Unfinished business. The next item of business is unfinished business. When the last meeting adjourned, we were considering the motion to hold the May meeting at the Arboretum. Is there any debate? In other words, last time you were talking about this motion, somebody had made a motion and seconded, and you were in the middle of debate, and somebody else made a motion to adjourn, and it was seconded, and you voted in favor of that. It was a majority in favor. And so you can just stop the meeting. You can adjourn the meeting in the middle of business. You don't have to go to the bitter end. It was whatever time, and you thought, okay, we got to get back to work, or we've got to go do this or that and the other thing. And so you can adjourn the meeting. And then what happens to that motion is that it automatically goes on to the agenda under unfinished business. And the chair just makes this announcement. This is what we were doing and talking about. This is the motion on the floor. And then we just continue debating and then to make the decision on that matter. And then usually what happens is the chair is unaware of any unfinished business. That is typical. And that's probably what you want to put in your script. But you will know when you come to writing the script whether or not you have unfinished business. You will know from the minutes whether there was anything left on the agenda, whether you were in the middle of a motion. And this motion to hold the May meeting at the Arboretum would be in last month's minutes. It just would say, you know, the motion was made and then the meeting adjourned. There would not be an indication of whether or not it passed or not because you didn't get to that part. But usually there is no unfinished business. If you have a long list of unfinished business written down, double check, make sure it just isn't a report, that it isn't supposed to go under reports, because so many times I see that where it's just a committee that reported a little bit last month and now they have more to report now. Well, put them under reports, not under unfinished business. And if you postpone a motion or an idea from last month's meeting, then that would be considered at this point. It would something that's postponed is automatically put on the agenda at this point. And both the things that you were in the middle of and the things you didn't get to and the things that were postponed all have priority over new business. And that's why we have the section called unfinished business. So new business, question? This works out well. When you pop on the screen, I know you've got a question. That's helpful. Go ahead, Zach.
We have a question from Alice who asks, if our city is responsible for overseeing and approving the audit, does the board also have to approve the audit?
I don't know. Yeah, well, again, would depend on city statute and stuff. I don't know. I'm sorry.
You did reserve the right to say that at the beginning.
Oh, I did, didn't I? Oh, good.
They're respecting your right.
Well, I don't want to lead you astray, and I am not an attorney, so I don't know. But these are good questions, and there should be ways to find answers to them but ask your city and look through whatever bylaws or statutes that they deal with. Mm-hmm.
That's the only question for now. Thank you, Pat.
All right. Okay, we get to new business on the agenda. The next item of business is new business. And there might be something listed on the agenda. So the chair would say, as you can see from the agenda, the first item concerns a speaker for the January meeting. And the chair will entertain a motion, or what would you like to do about having a January speaker, something like that. So the chair waits for a motion. The topic may be written on the agenda, January speaker, but there isn't a motion yet. So the chair will wait for a motion. And then after that is settled, is there any further new business? And the new business might not have anything written under it, but you still ask, is there any new business? Always ask, because members have the right to bring up new business, even stuff that's not listed on the agenda. Okay, we're getting into the home stretch here. Announcements. The next item of business is the hearing of announcements. And the chair gets first crack at that. The chair reminds members to whatever. Are there any other announcements? And then adjournment. Interesting way to do adjournment. You can have a motion to adjourn, but you don't need one. And if you've come to the end of the agenda and everybody's done, then you can just say or ask, is there any further business? And if nobody, if everybody's silent, then since there is none, the meeting is adjourned. And that's all you have to do. So you may make not you as chair, but someone a member may make a motion to adjourn, but it's not necessary. You've finished the agenda, you've come to the end, and or even if you've set a time to adjourn, you've come to the end, so you're just done. All right, I've got a couple of quick questions for you. It looks like I have about 5 minutes. I know you're all anxious to get back to work, and I want to thank you for being here today. Okay, first question, and you can just unmute, and I think may they unmute, Zach? Maybe.
They do have the power to unmute.
Okay, so you can just yell out the answer. What is the term for the minimum number of members who need to be present in order to validly conduct business? Who'll give me an answer? Just yell it out.
Quorum.
Quorum, yes, thank you. What are the 4 agenda items in the simplified standard order of business? Give me one. What's the first one?
Minutes.
Minutes, good. Give me the second one. Remember, it's M run. So it's something starts. Reports, yes. The third one starts with you.
Unfinished business.
Yes. And the last one starts with N.
New business.
New business. Very nice. Thank you. Who is responsible for enforcing the rules at a meeting?
Chair. Chair or president?
The chair or president. Thank you. And what is the secretary's main responsibility, except when it's off, when a staff member does it? Take the minutes, yes. Okay, who's buried in Grant's tomb? Who wrote the first edition of Robert's Rules of Order?
Henry M. Robert.
Yes, Henry M. Robert. Yeah, no S on the end now, just Robert. And what do we call the plan for the meeting?
Agenda.
Agenda, correct. And what motion adopts the minutes? Trick question.
Oh, no motion.
No motion. No motion to adopt the minutes. Very good. Didn't catch on that, did I? Okay, when are committee recommendations voted on?
Reports, during the reports?
Yes, during their reports. At the end of their report, if they have a motion to make, then that's, recommendation in the form of a motion. That's when they should do it. What are the correct ways to adjourn a meeting?
Declare it. Oh, ask if there's any, is there any new business, any more business, and then declare it.
Yes, ask if there's any more business, and if there isn't, then you declare it adjourned. That's one way. And the other one is the old-fashioned way of making a motion. Okay, good. All right, what do I have? Well, next time we meet is November the 8th, if you can believe it. And we'll talk about handling motions, particularly the 6 steps in processing motions. And we'll talk about rules of debate and whatever else will fit in that time frame. Okay, I have 11:29, Zach.
We do have one pending question.
All right.
Rebecca asks, would an educational component fall under announcements?
An educational component, I would think so. You're inviting people to attend an educational session. I think so. Or are you saying you're going to give an educational component? Are you going to make a presentation that's going to count as an educational component?
Feel free to unmute if you'd like to elaborate, Rebecca.
To give an educational presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of like a program. So you can do that anytime. You just put it on the agenda wherever it fits.
Thank you.
All
Okay,
right.
we are at 11:30. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time and respectful of Pat's voice. Thank you again for powering through. You did a wonderful job. And we hope, if you haven't done so already, please to register for the remaining 3 webinars that we have coming up. And thank you very much for attending today. I feel like everything I'm saying sort of falls short of the wonderful standards that are being set by what Pat is describing. But of course, we're not a governing board or anything. But nonetheless, I declare this webinar